Coming up tomorrow night, Thursday, the 21st of September at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Battle Creek, a special session put on by the organization Voters Not Politicians. It is a discussion of redistricting reform. Some of us use the word gerrymandering when talking about the way districts are drawn, voting districts, and among the participants in that will be Dr. Joe Schwarz, former U.S. Representative, of course, former mayor in Battle Creek, as well as the former Battle Creek City Manager Wayne Wiley will participate in that too. And Dr. Schwarz is here today to talk to us about that just ahead of that event. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Thank you for joining us today. So we talked about it last time you were here. We alluded to the idea that, gee, we ought to get together and talk about redistricting and gerrymandering and all of this stuff, and maybe we didn't realize it would be this soon, but here we are.
Who knew?
Yeah. What is gerrymandering?
Gerrymandering is the drawing of congressional districts or legislative districts, could be city council districts, just political districts, to favor one party or another, to favor one group or another, and drawn almost exclusively by the group that will gain the favor if they draw them for themselves. And it's been present in American politics forever. In other words, it's gerrymandering. The word is from Elbridge Gerry, who was the governor of Massachusetts in the first decade of the 19th century. And the mander part of it is he drew some legislative districts in Massachusetts that they felt on the map looked like a salamander. So you have the word gerrymander, and it's stuck. It's part of the political parlance in the United States and has been now for over 200 years.
And the indication then is that the way this has been done has not necessarily been above board or even. Is that the best way to say it?
No, it's totally legal.
Yes.
What has been done. However, in Michigan, the law is very clear that the reapportionment will be done by the legislature. Now, if you have a year where the governor is of one party and maybe one house of the legislature is of another party, in other words, not complete party domination across the board, governor in both houses of the legislature, you can get relatively fair districts drawn, or if you can't agree, then it goes to the courts. There's a plan out there called the APOL, A-P-O-L plan, named after a gentleman who came up with kind of a formula to draw plans. So back in the 80s and up until 1990, at 1980 census, the 90 census, the districts were drawn relatively well, let's put it that way. However, the last two have been drawn entirely by the Republican Party. And you know what that means. That means that they're drawn very much in favor of the party. What happens in the legislature, and I was in the legislature at this time, was, yes, the law says the legislature will draw the lines and approve. Well, the legislature doesn't draw the lines. The people are hired, very smart people, statisticians, to draw the lines to favor, in this case, it was the Republican Party. It could be the Democratic Party. In other states, it is. It's not something that's Republican or Democrat. It's both. When the lines are drawn that way, in Michigan, they're dropped in front of the legislature. Quite frankly, 95% of the legislators never look at the lines, never look at it. You get the piece of paper in front of them. Here are the lines. Here's what you got to do. Please approve it. It's approved and done. So it's not really done by the legislature. It's done by people who are professionals at gerrymandering, who are excellent at it, able at it. And that's why our legislative districts and our congressional districts in Michigan are drawn the way they are drawn.
So the presumption is that those professionals could be influenced one way or another.
They are influenced only at their background. In the case of the last two apportionments, was heavily Republican because the legislature was heavily Republican and the governor was Republican. So it could be precisely the other way. It could be heavily Democratic and the governor could be Democratic. It could be done that way. But
sure.
The point we're making here is that it can be terribly partisan if you have one party domination of the legislature and the governor's mansion. And that is what's happened in Michigan.
Dr. Schwarz, this sounds like the way this is set up now, there's not a lot of political motivation to change it, is there?
Not if you're hardcore one party or hardcore the other party.
Yeah.
The way it is now in Michigan, of course, it's done by Republicans, but it has been in the past done by Democrats. So, but we need to change it. We're very badly gerrymandered almost everywhere in the state below the Bay City Muskegon line. I urge everyone to go to their computers and pull up the 14th congressional district in Michigan and take a look at that. And I can say you're going to go, oh my goodness, I can't believe a congressional district would look like that. And I'm not going to describe it now, but you can go ahead and pull it up. But we have other ones that look almost as bad, and then you have other ones that are very subtly gerrymandered. We live in one. We are now in the 3rd congressional district, which is Calhoun, Barry, Ionia, and a huge chunk of Kent County, and over 450,000 in Kent County. So here we are down with this district. My favorite member of Congress for many years was John Dingell. He's a Democrat, I was a Republican, but John Dingell was a wonderful congressman and a wonderful public servant. And his saying was, and I've repeated it hundreds of times, what you need when you draw district lines is common community interest. That's how you draw them, common community interest. Our common community interest here in Calhoun County runs east and west. It does not run north and south. So we're basically gerrymandered out of the game with the congressional district we have now, which is essentially a Kent County district. The same is true of our state Senate district, Mike Knopf's district, which is Calhoun, Barry, and Ionia. That district ought to be organized east-west as well. But they've done that to put a lot more power up in the greater Grand Rapids area, and that's what's happened. If you look at southeast Michigan, the gerrymandering is in full force, believe me. So what we want is a commission, a nonpartisan redistricting commission to draw the lines in Michigan. It will be a ballot proposal on the ballot in 2018 in the fall election. We're collecting signatures now. I'm sure you'll be approached to sign a petition. These are all volunteer circulators of petitions. We have to get about 500,000 signatures, so we get something under 300,000 valid signatures to get it on the ballot. We're not the first state to do this. California did it a decade ago. It was the high point of Arnold Schwarzenegger's governorship, believe it or not. He's the one that pushed it in California, and the nonpartisan reapportionment commission in California has been a great success, and I know it would be a success in Michigan. The salient point here is in all of our statewide elections, whether it's election for President of the United States, Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, you take a look, and the vote is very close to 50-50 Republican and Democrat. I mean, it could be 2 percentage points off, something of that nature, maybe 3 maximum percentage points off Republican and Democrat. Yet, of our 14 members of Congress, 9 are Republican, only 5 are Democrat. In our state Senate, 27 are Republican, 11 are Democrat. In our state House of Representatives, 63 are Republican, 47 are Democrat. How do you get there? You get there by gerrymandering and drawing the district lines so that you cram as many Democrats into as few districts as possible, which is what the Republicans have done in redistricting in Michigan. The Democrats, had they the power, I assure you, would do precisely the same thing. That's why this is not a partisan issue. It's an issue of fairness, and it's an issue of putting the districts together so they make sense, and they do what John Dingell used to love, and I've repeated it so many times, and that is common community interest, which is what we need.
So how do we assure, then, that commission is bipartisan and has the correct interests in mind?
We've done everything we possibly can to draw the bylaws, so to speak. The commission will be 4 people who identify as Republicans, 4 people who identify as Democrats, 4 people who identify as independents, 1 person who is nothing, who is neither nor anything. Now, none of those people can have held office within 6 years of the time they go on the commission.
Okay.
The checks and balances are many, And if I didn't believe it would work, and if I didn't believe it was the right thing to do, I wouldn't support it. But all the years I've been in politics and all the gerrymandering I've seen and all the funny-looking congressional districts, not only in Michigan but elsewhere, and the funny-looking legislative districts, especially in Michigan, again, south of the Bay City-Muskegon line, we need to do something because you have people who are not being represented, and you also have a situation where people can come in and look at Michigan and scratch their head and say, you've got to be one of the 4 or 5 most gerrymandered states in the union. We are. Mm-hmm. The New York Times picked the 14th as one of the 5 most gerrymandered congressional districts in the United States, and Michigan always shows up on a list of states that have the most extreme gerrymandering.
Somebody out there might listen to those numbers, those breakdowns of elected Democrats and Republicans, and say, well, okay, so how do we know that we just didn't choose the right candidates in these races, and this is just the way it shook out?
I think that defies logic, quite frankly. People aren't stupid, and I don't think that's the way it worked. It works because the way these district lines are drawn, and all one who questions it would have to do is look at a map of the districts and say, oh, good Lord, look at that district. Mm-hmm. That district can't be anything but a 75% Republican district, or it can't be anything but a 75% Democrat district, because, as you know, until you pack the opposition party, whether you're Democrat drawing districts or Republicans drawing districts, you pack the opposition party into as few districts as possible. So it's pretty easy to recognize gerrymandering.
All right. So tomorrow's session, what would you hope folks would walk away knowing after participating tomorrow?
I would hope folks walk away understanding what gerrymandering is, that it's a widely used practice in the United States, in states where there's no real control over reapportionment. Michigan is one of those because our Constitution says the legislature will draw the districts, and in fact the legislature doesn't. Experts draw the districts from one party or another, drop them in front of the legislature. The legislature waves at it as it goes by and says, okay. Mm-hmm. That's not the way we should cut our congressional districts and our legislative districts. And what I hope to convince people of, and our organization, Voters Not Politicians, hopes to convince people of, is that there's a better way to do it, and a nonpartisan or bipartisan reapportionment commission is the way to go.
And you'll hear more about that and directly from Dr. Joe Schwarz tomorrow at this Redistricting Reform Town Hall. It's 4 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, September 21st, St. Thomas Episcopal, Van Buren Street, downtown. And it is sponsored by the Nonpartisan Ballot Committee, Voters Not Politicians. Former Battle Creek City Manager Wayne Wiley will also speak at this event, and you're welcome to attend. And Dr. Joe will be there and probably take a question or two as well if you have them.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we've set the stage so folks can join you tomorrow. Thank you for the time, and we'll stay in touch.
Richard, as always, good to be with you.
Thank you. Dr. Joe Schwarz on 95.3 WBCK.